Hey guys, happy Friday and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about recall and specifically about when it stops working. But if you haven't met me yet, let me introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Malloway. I'm a dog trainer and this is what this channel is all about. We talk about dog training, about behavior, and I try to sneak in there a lot of things that are about just how to be better people, because I found out there's a lot of overlap and I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, that's what we're about. David, thank you. That's very, too kind, too kind. But anyway, if you are joining for the first time, please say hi in the comments. I love to meet new people. And also, I'd like to let everybody know that if you haven't already, the easiest way to support the channel is by clicking the red subscribe button on YouTube. And other fun ways of supporting are linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's talk about recall. And as we go along, love to answer some questions if you have any about recall, because this is one of the behaviors that I get the most questions about. It's, I think, one of the most important behaviors and one that most dog owners really, really would like to have in their dog's repertoire. And interestingly enough, it's actually, I think, it's one of the easiest behaviors to train and to keep. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's super, super simple, but things can go wrong here and there. So that's what we're getting into today. Just subbed. David, you weren't subbed? That's crazy. How could you? No, you forgot I was live today and ordered food. That's okay. I knew I was live and I just figured I'd reheat it. No big deal. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk about this because on Dizzy's and my trip recently, I discovered that his recall, which was once just beautiful and glorious and like impressive, and we impressed people all the time, it has kind of degraded a little bit. And there were moments on the trip where I called him and he either didn't come right away or totally ran off the other way, and I was like, oh my goodness, what has happened to our beautiful recall? Of course, I know exactly what happened, and so I figured, hey, I'll share with you guys what happened, because it happens a lot, and we can talk about other things that you should know if you want to keep your recall really strong or build it to be really strong in the first place. So the reason why our recall hasn't been so great is because when we teach animals to do a behavior such as a recall, if you train it up really, really nice when you first get your dog or animal, regardless of the species, if you train them to come when called, when you first get them, sometimes we can sort of think like, okay, great, check, that one's done, now we move on to the next thing. Sometimes it's just because you get really excited about training other things, which might have been the problem with me. You're like, okay, we taught him that, let's, we got like a checklist. I want my dog to know all these things. And as soon as he gets pretty good at one, you move on to the next, and you may stop worrying about that first one. But the thing about behaviors and cues that we teach our dogs is that if you do not continue to reinforce them, continue to practice them, they can fall apart. AKA the dog or the animal can stop responding to the cues that you so carefully built up. And with Dizzy specifically, it's not that we don't practice it, it's that when I first trained it up, we used like top tier treats to reward his recall. And it's not that I continue to ask for the behavior occasionally. I would say at least once a week we use that special cue that we built up. And I always reward it because I know that that's very, very important. But what I think happened is that, like I said, in that initial training period when I taught him to respond to this recall cue, we used pretty much the best treats that I can. Like, I don't, for Dizzy, I don't think we'd be able to top it. And what what that reward was literally just ground up animal meat, bones, and organs, like just raw animal. That might sound gross to some of you, but to dogs, that is like the holy grail of food. At least to Dizzy it is. And so that's what he got as his recall reward. But we moved homes and I don't know where to find that stuff here. And so I was rewarding it with other stuff that I thought, this is probably pretty good. But I think that Dizzy may have decided that wasn't as good. And since months and months had passed and he didn't get that awesome reward anymore for performing the recall, especially when I'm calling him away from something amazing, he decided that, well, when we're on vacation and there's something super exciting to be done other than coming to you when you want me to, his money was on, I'm not going to have the good stuff, and so I'd rather go run off and play with other dogs or get into trouble. I don't know. No more fish, David. Yeah, the fish are okay, but they're freeze dried, so he's like, eh. Now, if I was giving him cans of sardines, that might be another story. Sandy, that's so funny. She said, I hadn't read your comment yet. Sandy goes, I use sardines. See, sardines are probably up there because, like, best treats for most dogs are going to be the stinkier, wetter, messier, grosser they are, the better response you're going to have for your dog's recall. Yes, thank you, Lunar Trader. Try talking to your local butcher. They can usually help. That's a really good idea. And we have farms and probably butchers and places that process animals all over here. So, okay, the truth is, all right, you guys, you got me. I didn't look that hard. But I had it so nice and easy. I mean, we had a beautiful shop in the Bay Area that I knew, like, it was high quality, like human grade stuff. I trusted their sources, like, you know, yeah. What about skunk poop then? I don't know. We've never, one, I don't know I wouldn't know where to find it. Two, I don't know if he'd be into it. And three, I don't really want to mess with it. So that's, yeah. We'll take Lunar Trader's suggestion and we'll talk to some local butchers. That's good. Hey, Kevin Michael Reed. And yeah. Oh wait, Facebook's down? What do you mean? Facebook is down? Or my video on Facebook is down? Anyway. Oh well. So yeah. So consider the reward. That's the point here. If the disparity between what you originally trained with and then you just stop giving them that good stuff ever, your recall is going to fall apart, as it did with mine. I know that poop isn't what you said, David, but I just, you know, I think that profanity coming out of my mouth just sounds weird. Like when I watch these videos back, if I say bad words, like, I don't know, it feels cringy to me. I'm like, oh, that's like, other people can pull that off. I don't know that I can. So that's why. Anyway, so yes, you have to continue to reward the behavior, and consider what you're rewarding them with. But this is a wholesome show. Do you not watch this show? Is this your first time watching, David? This is a very wholesome show, except for that one time we talked about humping. But no, we are. This is a wholesome show. So let's talk about maintenance. That's a sexy topic, right? Yeah, no, so what trainers call it, once a behavior is trained up to exactly how you want it, your dog is coming when you call every time, they respond right away and they run to you. Yeah, the humping show. Once you've trained that behavior to the way you want it, you have to continue to practice it and you have to continue to reward it at all, even, right? Like, so Dizzy's, I mean, we did, our opportunity to rehabilitate this behavior is still pretty good because I continued to reward it. I just wasn't using like the as good stuff. But a lot of people, they just, once the dog knows something, there's this idea floating around that, okay, we don't have to use food anymore. We don't have to reward the behavior. But the thing is, for dogs to respond to the cues when we want and how we want, it's helpful to think of that as like, that's the dog's job, right? They are employed by you, and the food that you give them is like a paycheck. And if we just stop paying the dog for the behavior, they're going to stop showing up to work, just the same as we would, right? And people, I get this response a lot too. They're like, well, then I mean, I don't want my dog to be dependent on food to perform, to do what I ask, right? They should, I either get this, they should just do it because they want to please me, which just isn't a thing, guys. I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but it's not a thing. It's a myth. It's a cultural myth that's been persisting, but I'm here to help you, so I'm going to tell you it's just not going to happen. If you expect your dog to just do what you want because they just want to make you happy, for most dogs it's not gonna work out. But the other thing, the other response that I get, or the question that I get is, well, why use food? I could just, people train using punishment. Well, if I just punish the dog when they don't do what I ask, then I don't have to use food. Then I don't have to carry food around with me, and the dog doesn't rely on food to perform the behavior. But the opposite is true too. If behavior that's not reinforced will not continue to occur. So you got to use food if you use food to train. But if you use punishment to train a behavior, then if you don't punish the behavior that's not, if you don't continue to punish the behavior, you're still not going to get the behavior that you want, right? So then the dog is dependent or reliant on you continuing to punish them. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel good punishing my dog. Like, it's not, I mean, one, I know all of the terrible things that happen that are side effects of using punishment to train an animal. So I don't want to do it. But it also just in my heart, it doesn't feel good, Like, not to mention, I have a very sensitive animal. And if I even give him the wrong eyebrow look or something, he's like, oh God, yeah. And some dogs are that sensitive. It's totally true. And I like to think, like, if I were a dog, I would be that kind of dog. Like, I was that kid, that if I... Okay, there's this moment that we were playing in so our laundry room in our basement growing up was nicknamed the no-no room. So I don't know what I was doing in there, but I was in the no-no room, which probably meant I shouldn't have been in there in the first place. And I broke a Halloween decoration, like a ceramic pumpkin and a cat, and it was like a cute light up thing. I broke it, and my mom didn't even need to find out for me to feel so guilty. It was like a gut punch. But as soon as my mom found out, she didn't even have to open her mouth, just the look on her face, and I was like, I totally fell apart. And this might be anthropomorphizing, but I think that's what happens with some dogs. It's like you don't have to do anything, and they know. And so think about what happens to that animal when you do something, like you actually punish them with your voice or with, physical, oh my gosh, those animals, that's permanent damage being done, terrible. Yes, thank you. I do need treats, Kevin. Yeah, this is a wholesome show. Start sexy topic. Well, obviously that was sarcasm. But yeah, Sandy, so kind of, I'm getting totally sidetracked here, but I like giving treats too. It just feels so much better to me to be able to give my dog treats and reinforce the behavior that I do want versus punishing the behaviors that I don't want. I don't know. All of the other arguments aside, giving just feels better. I don't know. It makes my relationship with him more fun for me and more rewarding, and not to mention it builds up the trust that he has in me, and the trust is like the most important thing. So, oh my gosh, total sidetrack. Yeah, negative reinforcement is a kind of archaic method that's still used. Negative reinforcement and positive punishment, both used all the time. And I unfortunately have followed some hashtags on social media, and I keep seeing like these, like there are people, professional trainers, who advocate like strongly for stopping the use of food in training, and instead like they're like, you should be employing fear in your training, employing punishment in your training. And I'm like, what are you doing? We're going backwards. No. And I have to use all of my self-control not to engage. But yeah, anyway, it is unfortunate. But I think that on the whole, things are trending the other way, which is good for dogs and it's good for owners. So yeah. Wait, move your comment up? Move my comment up. Let's see. Oh yeah, I gotta do that. There we go. Okay, thanks, David. So anyway, so going back to maintaining the behavior that you worked so hard for, continue to ask your dog for it, and when they do it, continue to reward it heavily. Be generous. I heard someone say once that, like, and I'm trying to remember who I first heard this from. It was I want to give credit to Jean Donaldson, but she said, and this isn't a direct quote, obviously. Yeah, I don't want overlays. That, like, when our dogs don't live long enough, right? Let's just all acknowledge that, like, we need our dogs to live longer. Their lives are just too short. But when they do reach their final years, their final months, their final days, like, none of us are going to be sitting there thinking like, oh man, I definitely gave him too many treats in his life, or, you know, I really should have punished, like, no one has those thoughts. When they reach the end of their lives, we want to do more for them. We want to, like, just give them the best experiences that they've ever had. And so why not be doing that all along, right? Fanny is approaching with our food, really? Oh, you don't meet too many people named Fanny. I know one person named Fanny, and she is super, super cool. And now apparently two super cool Fannies, because Fanny number 2 is bringing food, so can't argue with that. Also, yeah, we did a whole show, David, on lifespans of different breeds of dogs, and most small dogs tend to live a lot longer, including Pomeranians. They're up there in the 18 to 20 year range too. So what's for dinner, Sandy? We ordered food from Noodles and Company, and I think they have what's it called? Cauliflower noodles now. I'm trying not to have, like, grains as much, so we'll see how this goes. It was my job to make lentil soup today, and I didn't get around to it, so Noodles and Company. Treats for me. Anyway. So, yeah. Maintain your behaviors if you want to keep them, especially recall, because it's so, so important. It's a life-saving cue for your dog. And use good treats, right? So we also did another show on creating a hierarchy of food rewards for your dog, so that you know which ones to use when, to get the best behavior, to get really, really good behavior and use them effectively. And so when I say I'm using top tier treats for Dizzy's recall, like the ground raw meat, that's high value, and we want to use high value for recall, because recall is like I said earlier, that it's a simple behavior to train, in my opinion. But it's a big ask, right? We call it expensive behavior when we have to use the top tier stuff to get the behavior and to maintain the behavior. So from our dog's perspective, coming when called, like you think like, oh yeah, that's simple, that's easy. They should, why don't they just do it, you know? But when we ask them to run to us, usually they're doing something else. And if they're doing something else, it's because of all the choices they had to do in the world in that moment, they chose to do that instead of hanging out near us. So if we ask them to abandon that thing that they chose, is probably at least the second, maybe even the first option that they would have picked to do in all the world, right? And we're asking them to give it up to do the thing that we want. So not only is it just a behavior that we teach them to do, but you got to think of it in context, right? They are losing something. They're giving something up in order to do it. And so if you want them to continue to do that in all these different situations, to give up playing with another dog or sniffing something really interesting, which is really valuable to dogs, or maybe watching wildlife, or, I mean, what else could a dog have to give up? Like, these are things that we think, I mean, maybe we don't think. Maybe we don't think about it at all. If we do think about it, maybe we don't think like it's, you know, it's just a smell. It's just sniffing that patch of grass. But to our dogs, like, that's their whole world is sniffing and investigating smells, right? So if they're over there smelling this patch of grass, like, we don't see anything, doesn't look like anything special to us, but you call your dog in that moment, and that dog is like nose in the ground, like, this is really interesting, and like, to ask them to give that up, you better have something to trade, right? You better be able to reward that. And whatever they are giving up, your reward better be better than that. So when I say top tier, when I say high value rewards, go for the gold here. Like, reach for, find out what your dog loves best and use that. So I gave you an example of what we use, and Sandy suggested sardines too, which is really, really good. How about you guys? Have you taught this? And if so, like, actually, whether or not you've taught this, what would you use? What would be your dog's favorite thing? I love hearing people, because people get so creative. Like, and you can. The options of what you can reward your dog with are pretty limitless. So yeah. Oh, Sandy said it's an expensive behavior. Exactly. And no, Kevin, I didn't make the lentils yet. I was a little bit distracted today. No, I was multitasking, actually. I was rewatching some webinars because I want to, I don't know if I told you, but I recently, Dizzy and I have been working on our parkour title, and I also just finished a parkour instructor course because I want to teach this, because I think it's, even if you're like not really a sport person at all, or even a dog sport person, like, parkour is good for pretty much every dog and owner to learn. It's so good for so many different things and for so many different types of dogs, and so I want to teach it. So I just finished this course, and I was like going through the videos and sprucing up my notes. So I was kind of absorbed in that project today. Thank you. Yeah. So that is why the lentil soup didn't happen. I suppose it could happen later this evening. We could make it for tomorrow, because, soup is always better the next day, right? Oh, Sandy says, I use sweet potatoes now because Turtle has kidney issues. Oh, gosh, those, when they have issues. Yeah, Dizzy's got some digestive issues, too. So a lot of dogs do, and in those cases, we can still get creative and come up with some really good options. So sweet potatoes is a great option. Dizzy gets a lot of sweet potatoes too. I'm trying to perfect our sweet potato chips, because we got a dehydrator. Yeah, that's the one. We got a dehydrator, and you can buy sweet potato chips from the pet food store, but they're so much more expensive than just like buying sweet potatoes and maybe making them on your own. So I'm trying to get good at that to save some money, because it's such a good reward, and Dizzy loves them too. I don't know if it would keep his recall good, but it's good for a lot of things. Anybody else have food reward suggestions? Yeah, it's a great, it's a fun project anyway, although a little bit frustrating, because you got to get the slices like the same. Ooh, pig's ears. Yes. That's a really good one. And they're long lasting. And especially because recall is usually like, once you've trained it up, it's not something that you ask for a lot of in a row. We ask for it once here and there to keep it good. So it can be a great idea to use something that is like more like a chew than a treat that they swallow. Like they're like, oh man, I got my pig's ear and I can go off, and it's good for 20 minutes to an hour or however long it lasts. Kevin, your dog loves blueberries. Would that be, Dizzy, he used to eat a lot of blueberries, but now, I don't know. Some of them, he's like, there's too many of these are bitter. He's like me. I'm like, I like blueberries, but if they're too bitter, it doesn't work. But is it, so for your dog, would blueberries count as like top tier or mid-level or like low value treats? Would that be a recall treat or just an everyday treat? But yeah, no, Sandy, the dehydrated, this is so off topic, but the dehydrated sweet potatoes, you got to get like really uniform thickness throughout, and I can't. It's not a skill I have. So, yeah. Anyway, oh, she loves blueberries. That's so cool. I love using fruits and veggies. See, this is great. And if the dogs love them too, like that's amazing. So yeah. So let's talk about yeah, these are questions. So I think a lot about protecting the cues that I teach my dog. And I don't think this gets talked about enough. But when you teach a dog to do a behavior on cue, so you want them to sit or lie down or come when called, usually, what we have in mind is that they respond to a verbal cue, something that we say, and then they should do the thing right away, right? And we teach it, and it's a lot of fun teaching it when their dogs first come home. But it doesn't get talked about enough, like how fragile and how powerful that cue can be. Because it doesn't get talked about, the cue doesn't get protected, and you have to protect it if you want it to continue to have the power that you put into it in that initial training. And when it comes to recall, I talk about this most in the recall context because recall is just so important. That's really why. And so how do you protect a cue? You have to. You really want to aim to make sure that every time your dog hears the cue, that one, the behavior happens, and two, they get reinforced for it. So a lot of times, I've done this all the time too, and when it happens, I catch myself. But it's why I have two, well, actually probably more than two, but at least two different ways of calling Dizzy to me. So think about this. Throughout your day with your dog, do you ever call them when you don't really need them to come? Maybe you just want to stop them from doing something that they were doing, or maybe if this happens a lot when we're just like sitting around, like we'll just call our dog's name, just because sometimes we are the attention-starved ones. And you're just like, puppy, like, okay, you paid attention to me, that's all I needed. And we get a like a dopamine hit or something. Like it feels good to us that they like looked at us We just love when our dogs look at us, right? So this happens. We like call our dogs when we don't really mean it, or we don't really need them to come to us in that moment. And so then what happens is if the dog doesn't come, we don't follow through. We don't like go get them or call them again, or we're just like, okay, like whatever. Or the dog looks and they're like, what? And you don't, just like nothing happens. Then what happens is that they're hearing your cue. If you're using your cue to get their attention, or you don't follow through, then the dog is still learning in that moment that like sometimes they hear it and nothing has to happen. And what that does is it subtracts from the power of the cue that you put into it in the first place. Hey Jesse, welcome. Talking about recall. So if you've got recall questions, let us know. Also, if you have a really high value food that you use to reward your dog for recalls, share with us what it is. I love getting new ideas for reward ideas. So do you ever call them when you don't really need them to come? Or do you call them away from something fun, right? If you, like I said, if our dog is like really absorbed in a particular smell in the grass, if you chose that moment to call them, then they have to, it's obviously not like a conscious thought process, but they sort of do a calculation, like, is giving up worth the likelihood of what I'm going to get? And you can do that. You can call them away from something amazing. But if you can choose to wait until they've finished smelling that smell or greeting that dog or something, if you could just choose to wait a couple seconds to call your dog, like you're leaving the dog park and you're like, he's, in a particularly fun game with a chase game with another dog, like they will take breaks. Can you wait for a break to choose to call them away so that they're not actually having to give anything up in that moment? But sometimes you have to. So just, but bear in mind that they do have to make that calculation, even if it's not conscious. The reason I know that our recall has gone downhill is because when we first worked on this, it was really good. And I've used it in a couple of moments when I did have to call Dizzy away from something that I didn't know if I was going to be able to top. But it actually worked. And it worked a couple times. So in the places that we used to hike, we would often find animal carcasses, bird carcasses. Sometimes they were buried, sometimes not. But Dizzy's one of those dogs who's like, he's really going to get into that. He's either going to roll in it or try to eat it or try to carry it off and who knows what. So there were moments here and there where he was standing there with a dead bird in his mouth. And I'm like, and he's in a restricted area that he shouldn't have been in. So I'm like, I don't want to go chase him down to get this bird because we're not supposed to be in there in the first place. I really need his recall to work. And guess what? I called him with his recall cue, dropped the bird, ran to me, got his raw, gross meat stuff, and we move on. Another moment that this happened was he actually had a live gopher in his mouth. So our area was covered in I don't know if it was a gopher, voles or moles, whatever rodent was living in the ground. He caught a live one. Happened once, and again, like if I were to chase after him to try and get it back, we'd just be playing a game of catch me if you can. So not a good moment to try and chase your dog down. But really, really handy to have a recall that works. And it did. Yeah, Kevin, it's you're right. It is hard to top the taste of blood. I mean, it sounds kind of outrageous, but like these are the animals that we've invited into our homes. They're predators and carnivores and well, I guess dogs are omnivores, but still. They like the taste of blood, and it is really hard to top. But yeah, so this moment, this dog had a live rodent in his mouth, and I called him, and he dropped it and came to me, and I was like, And that moment, I have never been prouder in my whole life of him or of me. I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff works, like, you guys. I was so excited, and I rewarded the heck out of him. He got everything I had on my person, and that's what you should do if your dog ever comes away from something that, like, crazy. Give them everything. Be generous. Spill the bag, or whatever you've got. So yeah, that's how, so I knew, like, that was the level of recall that we had back then. And then, it's been 9 months of, I haven't had that, like, really good stuff. And now, if he's, like, off frolicking on the beach, there's nothing particularly special going on. Like, there were a couple times I called him and he was like, man, not now. So yeah. This is like, these are the types of things where it's like you really, really want them to respond. And when you're, I don't know, when you're weighing, like, the price of expensive treats, or, like, how dirty you want to get your hands, or how smelly of stuff you want to have to carry around, like, you may decide, like, my dog doesn't really need that. But think ahead to, like, the stuff that your dog might one day get into. If you want that recall to work in any scenario, you got to use the good stuff now. Let's see. Sandy says, a few weeks ago, Turtle saw a deer and turned on a dime and came back before I called her. Deer equals come. Mind blown. I gave her the keys to my car. I love that. Yeah. So, and this is a really good point too, guys. So if you always call your dog away, like, if wildlife is the thing that your dog is into, and you don't want them chasing deer, or you don't want them chasing squirrels, or you don't, if you call them away every time they see one, that's the thing that can happen. You don't even have to call them. They just know that if they turn away from that thing and come to you, you're going to get something amazing. And that is a beautiful moment. Sandy, that's, like, so cool. Because it's such a cool moment when, like, you've done all this training and your cues are powerful, and then you find out, my dog has learned this so well that I don't even have to ask. Like, I mean, does it get better than that? Really? Like, it's so cool. So protect your cues. So build them up strong with that really, really good stuff, and then protect them. Other ways to protect your cues. So we talked about, don't call them when they don't need them to come. Don't call them away from something awesome. Don't call them if they don't listen, that you're not willing to follow through. Don't continue to call them. Like, if you call them and they don't come, remember, repeating your cue means you're saying it more, and the behavior's not happening every time, which subtracts from the value again. So you want them to respond the first time, not only because it's protection for that cue that you really, really want them to value, but also, have you ever been out in public, and someone is calling their dog over and over and the dog's not listening? Like, I have to, like, I admit, I kind of judge them. Like, it's really hard not to, like, and it's not totally, like, mean or bad. Like, and part of me is like I want to help them, 'cause I can, but at the same time, it's like, it can be annoying too. It's like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know. Like, I can be, that's my moment of being a really judgmental jerk. So yeah, if you don't want to be that person that gets judged, or people are like, oh my God, their dog totally doesn't listen to them, you can be instead the really cool person whose dog will turn on a dime and run to them at the dog park. I swear to you, like, people will be so impressed, and all this power can be yours, for the low price of some sardines, or some raw meat, or whatever. The keys to your car in Sandy's case. Yeah. So these are ways that you can protect your cue, and definitely don't call them to you if we talk about this a lot, guys. No, don't call them if you gotta give them a bath. Don't call them if you're gonna trim their nails or do something, like, bad. And don't, for the love of whoever, don't call your dog and then expect a pat on the head to be reward enough for that. One, most dogs don't really value pats on the head all that much, especially if you're in a context where, like, if you're outdoors at all, like, forget the pat on the head. The vast majority of dogs are not gonna, like, it's not gonna be a reward. But even worse than that, for a lot of dogs, it's actually a punishment, especially if you're doing it outside. Like, for a select few dogs, a pat on the head might be nice in the context of, like, you're home and they're soliciting attention and they're soliciting pets. But oh my goodness, for a lot of dogs, just they don't like it across the board. But especially if they're outside and, like, there's a lot of stuff going on, like, they do not want pats on the head. I've never seen it happen. Never seen a dog be like, yay, this is awesome. I got pat on the head. No, don't do it. No, seriously, if you call your dog and you give them a pat on the head, in all likelihood, you're actually punishing them for coming when called, and next time they're going to think twice, and you don't want that. Nobody wants that. Here. Thank you, Sandy. And so here's for if you're not at that place, if your dog just, like, doesn't listen, you don't have a good recall yet. A couple of things. If you've like really worked on the recall, but you're realizing today that, like, you could have been doing it better, and you've been calling them and you'd say, like, I don't know, if they don't respond at least 80% of the time to the cue you've been using, it's time to change cue. Because if they've heard this word many, many times over the course of their life with you, and a large percentage of the time they haven't been responding, it'll be more efficient to just pick a new cue and start from scratch. So yeah, I don't know, it sounds silly. You may be even thinking, like, well, what do you mean? Like, what else would I use other than, like, Rover, come, maybe even Rover here. Like, those are the common cues. But, oh, Dizzy's whining. Do you want to get in here, bud? Yeah, well, he can wait. He can be apart from me sometimes, right? Gosh, we're just normally attached. We're attached at the hip. But anyway, yeah, your cue. I've been talking about the cue the whole time, but oh my gosh, did you know that you can get really fun and creative with your cue? I like to ask or teach everybody that you can pick a cue that is unique to you and your dog, and encourage you to do so, because one, it's really fun, but two, if your dog has their very own special cue that's different from all the other dogs' special cue, then when other people are calling their dog from out in a off-leash dog-friendly area, guess what? Your dog's not hearing it and not getting reinforced, because remember what that does? It devalues the cue for your dog. So have a special cue. Pick a special cue, and you can get it can literally be anything in the world. I was teaching puppy classes for a long time, and my students got so creative. Like, every class, like, everybody had a different cue. It was kind of amazing. People came up with, like, all these fun, creative things. Some people had, like, race car references, because that's what they were into. A good friend of mine, who I just taught recall with him and his dog, and he picked "Hey Kangaroo" as the cue. Dog's name is not Kangaroo, but that was just, he just got fun and creative. And you can do that. And you know, Dizzy's special cue that we've really worked on has been "Hey Handsome," but we've got, like I said, we've got at least two other ways of calling him to us. You know, one is just like a whistle, that kind of like your the whistle sound on if you've got an iPhone, or I just call his name and prompt him to come with, you know, looking like I'm throwing a party. I don't know. So yeah, so you can get creative. What other ones have people used? I've seen people yell, like, free pizza or free beer as their recall cue for their dog, which is really fun. Sandy, do you have special recall cues for your dogs? But I think it's really fun, and I also think that it can be a benefit Because especially if it's something totally non-traditional, because then other people aren't going to be out there yelling it. Actually, I either I either underestimated how handsome Dizzy is, or just didn't think ahead to like that I and other people are going to be saying this a lot, because when I picked "Hey handsome," like I just didn't realize that people were going to be telling him all the time how handsome he is, and I'm like, that could also have contributed to the recall cue kind of fading in its glorious power, but who knows? So think about these things. It's actually, it matters. It can matter. Come is the casual cue, and here is the emergency recall cue. So yeah, so you can pick those. But I just think it's a good idea to be consciously aware of having the casual one, because there are those moments that we just want to call our dog and it doesn't matter as much. And you don't have to use like the crazy good stuff for that one. But then you've got the emergency recall that you want to work when they're running toward a busy road, or when they've got the dead carcass in their mouth, or when you really need it to work. Save the emergency recall for those moments. Have two recalls. Who knew? And like I said, if you've been working on this and a lot of the time the dog doesn't respond, start from scratch, pick a new cue, and use the opportunity to make it fun. And I also think that, I wonder how many people take the time and specifically teach their dog their name these days. I like to teach it because I think that an animal's name itself is a cue. That, at least the way that I use it sometimes, it's a cue that means, please give me your attention, right? That's what our names are, right? If people are saying our names, usually it's to get our attention, and then comes the rest of the stuff that they wanted to say, or the request, or the directions, or, a name is an attention-getting cue. So, and dogs can pick up their names a lot of times without intentionally teaching it. But if you intentionally teach it and you do it so with food, you can get a snappier, quicker response. And if you work on getting their attention first, then when you've got their attention, then you can call them, and you're more likely to get them to do what you ask if you have already gotten their attention, for one, but also it's kind of a gauge, right? So if you use their name or an attention getting cue first and they don't even look at you, you're probably not going to get the recall. So if recall training has been a disaster thus far, then before you start the recall training, maybe try just working on getting their attention. Try getting this whip around, like they look and they turn and offer you eye contact when you say their name, or it doesn't have to be their name. You could use something else too, but their name is usually easiest. Train that first. And also the other benefit to doing this is that it gives us as the humans, as the dog handler, an opportunity to practice our training skills, because there are mechanical skills to be aware of when you're teaching a dog. And if we don't know what we're doing when we're teaching the dog, it's going to be a lot harder for the dog to pick it up, which in turn is going to result in weaker behavior. So starting with something like easier, or maybe of slightly less importance than the recall, which we talk about how important it is all the time, start with something that's simpler, easier, and not as important, to get your skills really good. And then when you teach the recall afterwards, you're going to be really good, and it's going to give you a better opportunity to get this really nice response from your dog. So, can your dog respond to just their name? Do they look when you say their name every time? I said we call our dogs much more frequently than we realize. But how often do we say their name? Like, oh my gosh. I mean, especially now that we're home all the time and we're around them more, like I say this dog's name, like, I don't know, I should count. I wonder if there's like a Siri listens to us all the time. I wonder if we can get Siri or Alexa to count how many times we say that word in a day. It'd be an interesting experiment. Maybe I'll have to do it manually, but I might do that. But we use their name so much, right? And we use it so much. Like, again, when we're just like, I want some attention, you know, Dizzy. Oh, I just wanted to make sure you still love me. I don't know, like it. You don't think, it sounds silly, and you don't realize how much it happens until you're like in the moment. You're like, oh my gosh, I do that too. I'm guilty. I do it all the time. Not that it's bad. Like you can use your dog's name, but again, awareness, being aware of it, can help us realize like how that's affecting the dog's response to the things that we say, and even the realization that their name is a cue. And one final thing about using their name as a cue, right? Remember at the beginning, I talked about how like dogs can be, and humans can be, so sensitive to just the smallest negativity from other people. If I say Dizzy in like an angry way, like that poor little soul, like he's gonna be scared, and he's not like, yeah, our tone matters. Our tone absolutely matters. I mean, think about like if somebody were to call you and they're like, you know, hey Jennifer, or hey Jennifer, you know, you say it that way, and you're much more like, you can turn with a smile because you're expecting this person to be glad to see you, or they have some good news, or you know, you're expecting positivity, something awesome. Whereas if someone was like, I don't even know how to, like, I don't know, like Jennifer or Jennifer, you know, you say it like that, and I'm like, I don't really know if I want to have this interaction. I don't like confrontation. I can't handle it. Like I gotta go, guys. Like, you know, like even before you know what's happening, you're already like, I feel you're going to have a totally, opposite response to that thing. And dogs, it's the same thing, right? They totally read our tone. And if we say their name in a negative tone often, like when they're getting into trouble, it can affect their response to their name in the future a little bit. Things to think about. So anyway, so I have some work to do. Like I said, our recall has been a little, maybe a lot, not as good as it once was, but I did recently get three big tubs of the good stuff, and now, thanks to your suggestions, I bought myself some time to find a butcher who might be have some things available to use for this too, to keep it going. But for now, we have to build that recall back up to get Dizzy to respond to it. So again, guys, don't protect your cues from the beginning, and don't forget to maintain them, right? You gotta practice, and you gotta continue to reward your dog for that really, really, for any behavior, not just the recall, but any behavior that you want them to continue to respond enthusiastically to. You gotta continue to give them that paycheck, right? So anybody have any questions? I mean, I feel like most of you here who are watching today know all of this stuff already, but if you're watching this on the replay, you're always welcome to throw some questions in the comments. I read every one, and if you found this helpful, again, I suggest that you hit the little red subscribe button on YouTube. It is, again, the easiest and best way to support the channel right now. Or there are some other fun ways if you want to go above and beyond, other ways to support the channel in the comments, or in the description below. And yeah, if you have any requests, that's the word. If you have requests for topics that you want to hear talked about, I was always open to suggestions. So throw those in the comments too. And I think that's all. That's all of the business to take care of. So Happy Friday. Thank you guys for joining me again today, and I will see you on Monday. So have a great week.